The Alliance of Midnight. In the town of Ashmoor, nestled deep in a forgotten valley, the veil between worlds grew thin on All Hallows' Eve. The moon hung heavy, blood-red, casting eerie shadows over the forest where monsters once slumbered. Ashmoor was a haven for the strange and the dark, a place where the supernatural could live in peace with humans. But peace is always fleeting. As the clock struck midnight, a group of 5 survivors gathered in an old church at the center of town. Each one was from a different world, a human, a vampire, a werewolf, a leprechaun, and a zombie. Their uneasy alliance had been forged out of necessity, but now their fate was bound by the blood moon above. The gathering. David, the human, glanced nervously at his makeshift companions. He had seen things in the last week that no mortal man should. His eyes met Seraphine's, a regal vampire whose beauty was only overshadowed by the coldness in her black eyes. "You do realize we're all enemies," he muttered. Seraphine's lips curled into a smile, revealing her fangs. "Enemies or not, if we don't work together, none of us will survive what's coming." The air shifted. A low growl filled the room as Goran, a werewolf, paced in the corner. His animal instincts were barely held in check, his fur bristling under his ragged clothing. "She's right," he growled. "The moon grows full, and the hunters are coming." Across the room, a small but ferocious figure sat atop a barrel of aged wine. Ryan, Leprechaun, was as old as the hills, and his tricks had saved them more than once. He twirled his shillelagh absent-mindedly, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Aye, laddie. Tonight's a night when all the rules break. Our worlds collide, and what comes after? Only doom if we don't plan." The last of the group stood silently in the shadows. Sarah, a zombie, her decaying flesh barely held together, grunted in agreement. She had once been human, but her loyalty remained to her own kind now, a reminder that the line between man and monster was thinner than ever. The prophecy. As the group strategized, a loud crack of thunder erupted outside, rattling the stained glass of the ancient church. The ground began to tremble, as though the earth itself was waking from a long nightmare. From the crypts below, an ancient scroll lay hidden, one that told of this very night. Seraphine glided to the center of the room, her long fingers brushing the stone altar. "There is a prophecy," she whispered, her voice echoing through the stone walls. "An alliance of 5, born from blood and death, will face the eternal night. If they fail, darkness will consume the world." David swallowed hard. "You're saying we're the prophecy?" Goran let out a snarling laugh. "Looks like the stories weren't just bedtime tales after all." The prophecy spoke of an ancient evil, something more terrifying than any of them. Not the vampires, the werewolves, or the zombies, but something that thrived in the chaos of all-out war between them, an entity that sought to consume both monster and human alike. The leprechaun's green eyes narrowed as he hopped down from his perch. "We need to seal the rift before the blood moon fully rises, or we're all dead men walking, even you, Sarah." Sarah groaned, half in agreement, half in hunger. She had little time left before her mind deteriorated, and they all knew it. The descent into darkness. Time was running out. The group ventured out into the night, toward the heart of Ashmoor Forest, where the barrier between their world and the underworld was at its weakest. The trees twisted unnaturally in the moonlight, and the wind carried voices, whispers of the dead and the damned. As they reached the clearing, the ground split open with a terrifying roar, revealing a pit of swirling shadows. From the depths, creatures emerged, monstrosities not of this world, their glowing red eyes fixed on the group, and the air filled with the stench of rot and sulfur. "Stand your ground," David yelled, raising his weapon, though deep down he knew their chances were slim. Goran transformed fully, his hulking wolf form barreling into the demonic creatures. Claws met flesh, and the fight for survival began. Seraphine moved like a blur, her fangs sinking into one of the shadow beasts, draining its essence before it could retaliate. Ryan used his magic, summoning illusions and wards to keep the creatures at bay, while Sarah, with a mindless determination, tore through the beasts with her decaying hands. But it wasn't enough. More creatures poured out from the abyss, and the blood moon climbed higher into the sky, its crimson light bathing the battlefield in a nightmarish glow. The final stand. In the chaos, David spotted something. A glowing shard of crystal buried in the ground at the center of the clearing. The prophecy had mentioned a key, a way to close the rift, but it would come at a great cost. "I've got it!" David shouted, sprinting toward the shard. But the ground quaked violently, and a monstrous figure emerged from the rift, towering over them. It was the entity, the harbinger of the eternal night. Its form shifted, made of shadows and fear, a creature beyond understanding. Seraphine and Goran rushed to David's side, but the entity's power was too great. It lashed out, sending them flying into the trees. Ryan's magic faltered, and even Sarah, resilient as she was, fell to her knees, her undead body breaking under the pressure. With no time to lose, David grabbed the shard, feeling its immense power surge through him. The only way to seal the rift was to sacrifice one of them, to give their essence to the crystal and close the gateway forever. The group gathered, battered and bleeding. "We have to choose," Seraphine said quietly, her eyes locking onto David's. Goran growled, standing protectively in front of the others. "I'll do it," he said gruffly. "This fight has always been in my blood." Ryan shook his head. You daft dog, no, it should be me. My tricks have run out. But before they could argue, Sarah stood. Her once lifeless eyes now held a glimmer of humanity. She stepped forward, holding out her decayed hand. I'm already dead. Let me be the one to finish this. There was a brief silence, and then, with a nod, they agreed. Sarah took the shard from David and placed it over her heart. In a flash of blinding light, her body disintegrated and the rift began to close. The entity roared, but it was too late. The gateway between worlds slammed shut, trapping the horrors on the other side. The dawn. As the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, the survivors stood in silence. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. David looked at the others, Seraphine, Goran, and Ryan, and knew that this fragile peace would not last, but for now they had saved their world from eternal darkness. Ashmoor was safe. For now.